I don't know if I should be posting this. I've typed this out maybe a dozen times and deleted it just as fast. It sounds insane. If I read this a month ago, I would have laughed and scrolled past. But I'm sitting here, staring at the empty driveway where his cruiser used to be. And I just need to get this down. I need someone to tell me I'm not losing my mind. Or maybe I need someone to tell me that I am. Because the alternative is so much worse. I'm a deputy in a place you've never heard of. Let's call it Osgood. It's one of those agricultural towns in the Pacific Northwest where the population is 3 digits, and the biggest event of the year is the high school football game. It's quiet. Or it was. Our sheriff was a man named Randall. I won't give his last name, out of respect for his family, but around here, he was the law. Not in a tyrant way, but in a fatherly, stern way. He'd been running Osgood for 30 years. He knew everyone's secrets, everyone's grudges, and exactly how much leeway to give the teenagers drinking down by the river before sending them home to their parents. It started on a Tuesday. The forecast said we were in for a heavy system coming off the coast, but we're used to rain. We're used to wind. We weren't used to this. By noon, the sky turned a bruised, sickly purple. The clouds weren't just moving, they were boiling. The rain didn't fall. It was driven sideways like buckshot. I was at the station, a glorified brick box next to the post office, watching the transformers blow down Main Street. It looked like a string of fireworks going off, blue sparks showering the asphalt. Then the power died. That heavy, suffocating silence you only get when the hum of electricity vanishes. "Get the generator, kid," Randall said. He was sitting at his desk, cleaning his glasses. He didn't look up. He never looked worried. That was his thing. He was the anchor. I went out back and fired up the old diesel beast we kept for emergencies. When the lights flickered back on, the hum was comforting, but the radio remained dead silent. The storm had knocked out the repeater tower on the ridge. Cell service was gone too. We were effectively ghosts. The first sign that something was wrong wasn't the storm. It was the frantic banging on the front glass door about an hour later. It was Mrs. Gable. She lived about 4 miles out, near the old logging road. She was soaked to the bone, her gray hair plastered to her skull, shivering so hard she could barely stand. I unlocked the door and the wind nearly ripped it out of my hand. She stumbled in, dripping onto the linoleum.
"It's gone," she wheezed. "Sheriff, it's all gone." Randall stood up, hitching his belt. "Slow down, Martha. What's gone? The barn?" "The house,"
she said, her eyes wide, staring at something none of us could see. The side of the house. Something pulled it off. We assumed it was a tornado. We don't get them often, but with a storm like this, freak weather happens. Randall grabbed his keys and tossed me the keys to the second unit, a heavy-duty 4x4 truck. "Let's go take a look. You drive lead, I'll follow. Watch for downed lines." The drive out to the Gable place was a nightmare. Visibility was 0. The wipers were thrashing back and forth, fighting a losing battle against the deluge. Branches the size of my leg littered the road. I had to stop twice to winch a fallen tree out of the way. When we pulled up to Mrs. Gable's property, I couldn't make sense of what I was seeing. The storm hadn't blown the wall off her house. The siding was shredded. I don't mean torn by wind. I mean it looked like someone had taken a dull knife to a cardboard box, but on a massive scale. 4 parallel gouges ran from the roofline down to the foundation. They had cut through the vinyl siding, through the plywood sheathing, and deep into the insulation. I got out of the truck, the rain stinging my face. Randall was already standing there, his flashlight beam cutting through the gloom. He wasn't looking at the damage. He was looking at the mud near the foundation. "Deputy," he said. His voice was tight. "Bring the flare." I walked over. In the churned-up earth, filling rapidly with water, was a depression. It looked like a footprint, but the anatomy was wrong. It was 3-toed, long and deep. It had to be 18 inches long. "Bear?" I asked, though I knew we didn't have bears that big. "No," Randall said. He shone the light back on the wall. At the top of the gouges, embedded in the wood, was a fragment of something dark and keratinous. A broken claw tip. It was the size of a steak knife. "Get Martha in your truck," Randall ordered. "We're taking her to the church basement. It's the designated shelter. Then we're doing a roll call." "Sheriff, what is that?" "I don't know." He lied. I could tell he was lying. I'd worked with him for 2 years. He had a tell. He rubbed his left thumb over his wedding ring when he was holding something back. He was doing it now. We dropped Martha off at the church. Father Lewis was there with a few other families who had lost power and wanted company. We told them to stay put, lock the doors, and not open them for anyone but us. The nightmare really started when we tried to cross the bridge to the north side of town. The river had crested. The bridge wasn't just washed out. It was smashed. The concrete pillars were crumbled, not from water pressure, but from impact. We were trapped. Osgood is in a valley. With the north bridge gone and the south pass blocked by a landslide, which we discovered an hour later, we were in a bowl. By nightfall, the calls started coming in. Not via phone, but in person. People driving through the storm, terrified. Farmer Henderson showed up at the station at 8 p.m. He was a big man, not easily spooked. He was shaking.
"My cattle," he said. "They're dead, Randall." "Lightning?"
Randall asked. He was sitting behind his desk, staring at a map of the town he'd spread out. He was marking X's on it with a red Sharpie. "No," Henderson said.
"Slaughtered. But they aren't eaten, just killed. And arranged."
That word made the air in the room drop 10 degrees. "Arranged?" I asked. "In a circle," Henderson whispered. "Around the scarecrow. And the scarecrow, it's wearing my jacket." Randall stood up abruptly.
"Deputy, stay here. Monitor the radio frequencies. See if you can catch any chatter from the state police. Henderson, go to the church." "Where are you going?" I asked. "Patrol," Randall said.
He grabbed the shotgun from the rack. He didn't take the non-lethal rounds. He loaded slugs. I sat alone in that station for 3 hours. The generator chugged along, a heartbeat against the screaming wind outside. I tried every channel on the radio, nothing but static. But not empty static. It sounded wet, like heavy breathing against a microphone wrapped in wool. Around midnight, Randall came back. He looked 10 years older. He was soaked, and there was mud on his jacket that looked suspiciously red. "Is it bad?" I asked. He walked to the map and drew another X, then another, then another. I looked at the map. The Gable place, the Henderson farm, the bridge, the old mill. The X's were forming a spiral, a tightening loop. And the center of that loop wasn't the town square. It was the sheriff's station. "It's testing the perimeter," Randall said softly. He poured himself a cup of lukewarm coffee. "It's checking the fences. What is?" He looked at me then. His eyes were hard, flinty. "I don't know its name, kid, but I know what it wants." "And what is that?" "Authority," he said. I didn't have time to ask what he meant because the lights flickered. The generator sputtered. Then from the darkness of the holding cells in the back, which were empty, came a sound. It wasn't a creak. It was the sound of metal stressing. The sound of steel bars bending. I drew my service weapon. Randall didn't. He just racked the slide of his shotgun. "It's inside," I whispered. "No," Randall said. "It's on the roof." We heard heavy, dull thuds on the tar paper above us. It sounded like someone dropping bowling balls. The ceiling tiles dusted plaster onto my desk. "It knows we're here," I said, my voice trembling. "It knows I'm here," Randall corrected. "You need to leave." "What?" "No, I'm not leaving you. This isn't a debate, deputy. Take the back door. Run to the church. Guard the people. Sheriff, there is a monster on the roof, and it won't come down until I invite it, or until it thinks it's won," Randall said cryptically. He walked to the center of the room, right under the spot where the footsteps had stopped. He looked up at the ceiling. "Go." I hesitated. That was my mistake. The ceiling didn't collapse. It dissolved. Great black talons, like the ones that had scarred the gable house, punched through the drop ceiling and the roof beams like they were wet paper. Debris rained down. I saw a limb, thick, covered in matted, coarse fur that looked like wet pine needles, snatch at the air. Randall fired. The slug hit the limb. There was a screech that sounded like metal grinding on glass. The limb retracted instantly. Black fluid dripped from the hole in the ceiling. It hissed when it hit the floor tiles, smoking. "It bleeds," Randall said, a grim smile on his face. "Go, kid, now!" I ran. I'm not proud of it. I bolted out the back door into the storm. The wind nearly knocked me flat. I scrambled through the alleyway, slipping in the mud, heading toward the church. As I ran, I heard the shotgun boom again. And again. And then, a sound that I will never forget. It was a roar, but it wasn't animalistic. It sounded like a voice, deep and resonant, amplified by the storm, shouting a single word in a language I didn't recognize. It vibrated in my teeth. I made it to the church. I barricaded the door. I spent the next 6 hours holding a rifle, pointing it at the entrance, while the townspeople huddled in the pews, praying or crying. The storm broke at dawn. Just like that. The rain stopped, the clouds parted, and a cold, gray light washed over Osgood. I waited an hour before I gathered the courage to go back to the station. I took Henderson and 2 other men with me. We were armed with hunting rifles and crowbars. The station was a ruin. The roof was caved in. The front wall was buckled outward. We climbed through the debris. The inside was trashed. Papers, furniture, glass, everywhere. "Sheriff?" I called out. Silence. We found his shotgun near the dispatch desk. The barrel was twisted. Twisted like a pretzel. There was no blood. No body. But on the wall, the back wall where Randall's awards and certificates used to hang, there were marks. 5 deep gouges. But they weren't chaotic. They were deliberate. They looked like a tally mark, or a signature. We searched the town for days. The state police finally got through once the roads were cleared. They brought dogs. They brought helicopters. They found nothing. They ruled it a freak weather event. Said a tornado must have touched down specifically on the station. They said Randall probably got sucked out and deposited in the river, washed downstream. Case closed. Tragic loss of a public servant. But they didn't see the map. I found the map under the rubble of the desk. Randall's map with the red X's. I kept it. I studied it last night. The X's weren't just a spiral. I connected the dots with a ruler. The Gable House, the Henderson farm, the bridge, the mill. They formed a perfect pentagon around the station. But here is the part that keeps me awake. Here is why I'm writing this. Yesterday I was cleaning out Randall's locker. I found a journal tucked in his spare boots. It wasn't a diary. It was a logbook. It went back 30 years, to the week he was elected sheriff. The first entry was dated November 12, 1993. The pact is made. Order for safety. I keep the peace within the borders. It stays in the woods. The term is 30 years. God forgive me. It was exactly 30 years to the day when the storm hit. I'm the acting sheriff now. The town council appointed me this morning. They said I showed bravery during the crisis. They gave me Randall's badge. It feels heavy, heavier than a piece of metal should. And tonight, just an hour ago, I was sitting in the temporary office we set up in the community center. It's quiet. The phone lines are back up. But the radio turned on by itself. It wasn't static this time. It was a voice. Low, gravelly. New term begins, it said. And then I heard a sound on the roof, just a soft thump. I'm sitting here with the gun on the desk. I don't know what the terms are. I don't know what Randall agreed to. But I think the storm is coming back, and I think I'm the one who has to hold the line. If you don't hear from me in a few days, don't come to Osgood. Stay off the back roads, and if you see a storm that looks like a bruise on the sky, turn around and drive until you run out of gas. Because the sheriff is in and he's terrified. Story 2. I've been wearing a badge for 20 years. I've seen drunk drivers wrap their sedans around telephone poles and domestic disputes that ended with everyone in handcuffs. It's ugly, sure, but it's usually predictable. You learn the rhythm of a small county. You know who hits their spouse on payday and which teenagers steal beer from the gas station on Route 9. But I'm resigning tomorrow. I can't put on the uniform again. Not after Tuesday. I'm posting this here because the official report I filed is a lie. I had to lie. If I told the truth, they'd put me in a psych ward, or worse, someone else would go out there to investigate. And nobody else should ever go out there. It started with a radio call about a missing patrol unit from the neighboring county. The GPS last pinged near the jagged tree line that separates our jurisdiction from the Badlands, a stretch of rocky terrain nobody builds on because the ground is unstable. My deputy, a sharp kid named Lena Kovich, was driving. She's only been on the force for 2 years, eager to prove herself. I told her to take the 4x4 off-road toward the coordinates. We found the vehicle around 2 p.m. It wasn't a crash. I need you to understand that. If you hit a deer or a tree, the front crumples. The glass shatters. This was different. The cruiser was sitting in a patch of tall yellow grass. The roof had been peeled back. I don't mean crushed. I mean peeled, like someone opening a sardine tin. The metal was curled outward, exposing the jagged white edges of the torn steel. "Jesus," Lena whispered. She kept her hand near her holster. I walked around the wreck. The driver's side door was gone. Not open. Gone. Ripped from the hinges. The interior was soaked, not just on the seats, but sprayed across the dashboard and the ceiling. It had dried into a sticky copper-colored film. There were no bodies. No drag marks indicating someone had crawled away injured. "Sheriff Dalton," Lena called out. Her voice was tight. "Look at the ground. The soil out there is hard-packed clay, but something heavy had churned it up. Deep indentations led away from the wreck. They weren't boot prints. They looked like post holes punched into the earth, spaced 4 feet apart, heading straight into the thicket that hides the old access road. They lead to Iron Ridge," I said. Iron Ridge is a ghost town about 5 miles in. It used to be a mining hub until the veins dried up in the 70s. Now it's just rotting wood and rust. "We should call state," Lena said. "Radio is dead out here," I reminded her. I checked my receiver. Static. We track them. If there's a survivor, they might be bleeding out in the woods. We grabbed the rifles from the rack and followed the trail. The walk took us 2 hours. The whole time, the forest felt wrong. You know how usually woods are noisy? Birds, insects, the wind in the leaves. This was dead air. Total stillness. The only noise was the crunch of our boots on the gravel. When we broke through the tree line, Iron Ridge looked like a scar on the valley floor. A dozen collapsed houses, a general store with a caved-in roof, and the looming structure of the mine shaft elevator rusting against the gray sky. The trail of disturbed earth went right down the main street. As we passed the first house, I saw it. Hanging from the porch overhang was a shape. Is that? Lena stopped. It wasn't a person. It was a construction. Someone, or something, had taken rusted mining tools, pickaxes, shovels, and lengths of chain, and bound them together with something that looked like dried sinew. It hung there, twisting slowly in a breeze I couldn't feel. It looked like a warning. We kept moving. The blood trail picked up again near the mine entrance. It was fresher here. Wet. "Sheriff," Lena said, pointing her rifle light toward the gaping maw of the mine shaft. The sun was starting to dip below the hills, casting long, distorted shadows across the town. "I see a boot." It was a tactical boot. It was lying just inside the entrance of the mine. I signaled for her to stay back and approach the opening. The smell hit me first. It wasn't the smell of death, exactly. It smelled like wet fur and old, stale iron, damp earth and rot. I shined my light inside. The beam cut through the dust. The tunnel went down at a steep angle. The wooden supports were rotted but holding, and all along the walls, wedged into the cracks of the rock, were more of those things. Helmets crushed flat. Badges. Pieces of uniforms. They were trophies. "Dalton!" Lena hissed. "The sun is down!" I turned around. She was right. The valley walls were high and twilight had vanished rapidly. It was getting dark, fast. "We need to go," I said. "Now. What about the deputy?" "There is no deputy, Lena. Not anymore." We turned to leave, walking briskly back toward the tree line. That's when I heard it. It wasn't a growl. It was a shifting of weight. Massive weight. It came from the mine entrance behind us. I spun around, raising my rifle. The mine entrance was a black void. I couldn't see anything, but I could feel it. The hair on my arm stood up. "Keep moving," I said, backing away. "I see something," Lena whispered. Her voice was trembling, up on the head frame. I looked up at the rusting metal tower above the mine shaft. At first I thought it was just 2 stars, but they were too low, and they were blinking. 2 pale, reflective discs were staring down at us from 40 feet up. They caught the ambient light of the moon perfectly. They were wide, wider than a human's, wider than a bear's. Then they vanished. "It moved," Lena said. "It's fast. It's so fast." We started running. We didn't care about noise anymore. We sprinted for the tree line. The sound of movement paralleled us. It wasn't on the ground. It was up high, moving along the roofs of the abandoned houses. I could hear the wood groaning under sudden pressure, the clatter of loose shingles sliding off. It was toying with us. We hit the woods. The canopy blocked out the moonlight, plunging us into near-total darkness. I fumbled for my tactical light, but my hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped it. When the beam flared to life, I swung it behind us. Nothing but trees.
"Dalton, left!"
Lena screamed. I swung the light left. For a second, just a fraction of a second, I saw it. It was crouched on a thick branch, maybe 10 feet off the ground. It was pale, grayish-white, like the belly of a dead fish. It had long, multi-jointed limbs that wrapped around the tree trunk. But the face, it didn't have a face. It just had those eyes. Enormous, milky spheres that took up the entire upper half of its head. Below them, where a nose and mouth should be, there was just smooth, wet skin. It didn't scream. It didn't roar. It just stared. It was perfectly adapted for this. It lived in the dark. It was the dark. I fired. The recoil of the rifle hurt my shoulder. I pumped 3 rounds into the tree. Bark exploded. When the dust settled, the branch was empty.
Run!
I roared. We didn't stop until we reached the 4x4. I threw the keys at Lena and she fumbled them into the ignition. The engine roared to life. We peeled out of there, tires spinning in the mud, bouncing violently over the uneven terrain. I watched the rear window until the trees swallowed the view. I saw them one last time. Those 2 reflective eyes, floating in the middle of the road, watching us leave. It hadn't chased us to the car. It let us go. We got back to the station an hour ago. I told the dispatcher we found the car empty, looked around and came back. I said we saw a bear sign. Lena hasn't spoken a word since we parked. She's sitting at her desk, staring at the wall. I'm sitting here, writing this, because I need someone to know. We didn't find the missing deputy. But when I was cleaning my rifle just now, I found something stuck to the barrel. It must have brushed against the creature when I turned to fire, or maybe it fell from the tree. It's a fingernail. But it's not human. It's thick, black, and serrated like a steak knife. And the worst part? The radio in the wrecked car. When we first found it, I thought the battery was dead. But I remember now. The wires weren't cut. They were carefully disconnected. Whatever is in that mine isn't just an animal. It's smart. And it knows we know where it lives. I'm leaving my badge on the desk. I'm packing my car. I suggest you stay away from Iron Ridge. And if you're driving near the county line at night, don't look into the woods. Because even if you can't see anything, it can definitely see you. Story 3. I don't know where else to post this. If I went to the state police, they'd verify my badge number, listen to my story, and then have me committed for a psych evaluation. But I need to get this down in writing, just in case things go south tonight. I've been a deputy in this county for 6 years. It's quiet work, mostly noise complaints and teenagers drinking in the cornfields. Our boss, Sheriff Grant, is the kind of guy who's been around since the glaciers melted. Tough, quiet, fair. The kind of man who commands respect without raising his voice. 3 weeks ago, we got a call about a disturbance out near the old logging trails. A camper said something big was tearing through their site. Grant took the call himself because he lived closer. I was the backup. When I pulled my cruiser up to the site, the first thing I noticed was the silence. Usually, the woods at night are loud. Bugs, wind, critters. This was dead silent. I found Grant by his truck. It was bad. I won't go into the gore, but whatever hit him had opened him up like a zipper. Throat, chest, stomach. There was so much blood I slipped in it, trying to get to him. The paramedic who arrived 10 minutes later said there was no way he was making it to the hospital. He had lost too much. His vitals were barely registering. But here's the thing. He didn't die. He was back at the station in 2 weeks. 2 weeks. The doctors called it a miracle. They said his clotting factor was off the charts, that his cells regenerated at a speed they'd never seen before. They wanted to keep him for observation, but Grant signed himself out against medical advice. When he walked into the station last Monday, the room went quiet. He looked different. Better than before, actually. The gray in his stubble was gone. The lines around his eyes had smoothed out. He moved with this fluid, terrifying grace that didn't fit a 60-year-old man who had been nearly disemboweled a fortnight prior. Back to work, he said, and walked into his office. That was the first red flag. The second was the lights. I went into his office to drop off some paperwork the next day. The blinds were drawn tight, and the lights were off. It was pitch black in there. "Sheriff?" I asked, hesitating at the door. "Leave it on the desk, Collins," he said. His voice came from the corner of the room. I fumbled for the light switch, but he stopped me. "Don't. My head is killing me. The light hurts." I walked into the darkness. As I set the papers down, I looked toward the corner where his voice had come from. A stray beam of sunlight from the crack in the blinds hit his face. His eyes reflected the light. I don't mean they were shiny. I mean they flared, a distinct greenish-yellow luminescence, exactly like a cat caught in headlights. He blinked, and the reflection vanished. "Is there something else, Deputy?" he asked. His tone wasn't angry, but it made the hair on my arms stand up. It was a low rumble, deep in his chest. "No, sir," I said and got out of there. Things got weirder. He stopped eating lunch with us. I found raw hamburger wrappers in his trash can, like the bulk packaging from the grocery store, just torn open and empty. And the smell, he used to smell like Old Spice and coffee. Now, passing him in the hall smells like wet copper and heavy musk. It triggers some primal alarm bell in my brain that says run. But tonight is why I'm writing this. We were on a stakeout. There's been a string of livestock disappearances since Grant got attacked. Cows torn apart. Horses vanished. We were parked on the edge of the Miller farm, sitting in the dark. I was trying to make conversation to break the tension. "You think it's a bear, Sheriff? Maybe a mountain lion?" Grant didn't answer. He was staring out the window, his head cocked to the side. The window was rolled down, letting the cold air in. "It's not a bear," Grant whispered. "How do you know?" "I can hear it," he said. I strained my ears. I couldn't hear anything but the wind. "Hear what, sir?" "Its heart," Grant said. He turned to look at me. In the dim dashboard lights, his pupils were blown wide, encompassing nearly the entire iris. "And I can hear what it's thinking." I laughed nervously. "Okay, boss. Very funny." He grabbed my wrist. His grip was like a hydraulic press. It wasn't human strength. "It knows I survived," Grant said, his voice trembling. Not with fear, but with something that sounded like anticipation. "It didn't finish the job. It put its venom in me, Collins. It changed the architecture. But it didn't kill me. Now it realizes its mistake. It realizes I'm not just a victim anymore. I'm competition." I tried to pull my arm away, but he wouldn't let go. "It's coming here tonight," he continued, "to finish it before the change is permanent, before I become what it is." "Sheriff, you're scaring me," I managed to say. "We need to get you a doctor." He let go of my wrist and sniffed the air. His upper lip curled back, just for a second, revealing teeth that looked too sharp, too white. "It's about a mile out," Grant said, looking toward the dense timberline. "Smells like rot and old blood. It's moving on 2 legs right now, but it'll drop to 4 when it starts the sprint." "What are you talking about?" He reached under his seat. I thought he was going for the shotgun. Instead, he pulled out a hunting knife, a big Bowie blade he'd had for years. He unbuckled his gun belt and tossed it into the back seat. "Stay in the car, Collins," he said. "Lock the doors. Do not turn on the headlights." "Where are you going?" I practically shouted. Grant opened the door. He didn't look like an old man anymore. He looked massive. His jacket seemed tight across his shoulders. "If I hide, it'll hunt me down," he said, looking back at me one last time. His eyes were fully glowing now, even without direct light hitting them. "And if I hide, I stay human. I stay weak. If I want to survive this, I have to meet it halfway." He stepped out of the vehicle. "Sheriff," I yelled. He ignored me. He started walking toward the tree line. Then he started to jog. Then he broke into a run that was impossibly fast. I saw him hunch over, his posture changing, his arms swinging low. He vanished into the woods. That was 2 hours ago. I'm sitting here in the dark, doors locked, clutching my service weapon. About 20 minutes ago, I heard a noise from the woods. It wasn't a gunshot. It wasn't a human scream. It was a roar, 2 of them, actually, overlapping. One sounded like a massive beast, deep and guttural. The other sounded like a man, but distorted, amplified, screaming in a way that sounded less like pain and more like fury. Then silence. I'm staring at the tree line. I don't know what's going to walk out of those woods. I don't know if I want Sheriff Grant to lose, because that means the monster is coming for me next. But I'm even more terrified of what happens if he wins. If he comes back, I don't think he's going to be the sheriff anymore. I think he's going to be the apex predator. I see movement in the brush. Something is coming out. It's standing on 2 legs. It's wearing a tattered sheriff's jacket. It's smiling at the car. God help me. Story 4. All right, I don't know why I'm posting this here. I guess I can't put it in an official report, and if I told my deputies, they'd think I'd finally lost it. But I have to get this out somewhere, even if it's just to a bunch of strangers on the internet. Maybe one of you has seen something like this. Maybe I'm just sleep deprived. I don't know. My name is Jacob West. I'm the sheriff of a small, unincorporated county in the foothills. It's the kind of place where the biggest news is usually a prize-winning pumpkin at the county fair or someone's cow getting loose on the highway. We're a quiet community. Or we were. 3 weeks ago, the storm of the century hit us. The rain didn't stop for 4 days straight. The creek that cuts through our valley, a little thing we've always called Dogman Creek, a dumb name from some old local legend, nothing anyone ever took seriously, turned into a raging brown monster. It tore up everything. When the water finally went down, it left a mess of mud, debris, and uprooted trees all along its banks. Some of those were ancient oaks, their root systems ripped out of the ground like rotten teeth, leaving huge, gaping holes in the earth. That's when the trouble started. First, the Peterson brothers went missing. They were regulars, always out fishing at dawn, flood or no flood. We found what was left of them 2 days later, snagged in a log jam about a mile downstream from their usual spot. The official coroner's report said an animal attack. A bear, maybe, disoriented by the flood. I've seen what a bear can do to a person. This was different. It looked furious, hateful. Things were torn apart, not just eaten. I didn't sleep right for a week after that. A few days later, a hiker's car was found abandoned by one of the trails that follows the creek. We never found him. Just a boot, his pack, and a trail of blood that ended abruptly at the water's edge. Panic started to set in. I told people to stay away from the creek, to keep their pets inside. But this is a stubborn town. People don't like being told what to do. Old Man Hemlock, who lives on a remote plot of land bordering the woods, called me in a frenzy last week. Said something had gotten into his goat pen. It didn't just kill one for food. It slaughtered all 7 of them and left them in a pile. The fence wasn't broken down. It was bent upwards, from the inside, as if something had climbed in, done its work, and then pushed its way out from the bottom. The real break, the one that's got me typing this at 3 a.m. with a shotgun on my lap, came yesterday. A deer hunter, one of the few brave enough to still be out there, checked his trail cam. He was hoping for a buck. What he got was something else. He brought the memory card straight to my office, his hand shaking so bad he could barely get it out of his pocket. The pictures are time-stamped just after midnight. At first, it's just a dark, blurry shape at the edge of the frame. But then it moves closer. It's tall, gangly, and stands on two legs, but it's hunched over, its arms long and thin, ending in something that looks like claws. Its head is elongated, like a canine's, with eyes that reflected the camera's infrared flash with a sickening bright white glow. It looked like a man in a cheap monster costume, and I almost laughed with relief. But then I watched the video clip. It stands there for a moment, head twitching, sniffing the air. Then it seems to sense the camera. It turns its head, and the movement is all wrong. Too fast, too fluid. It lets out a low, guttural sound, a sound that made the hair on my arm stand up, and then it moves. It drops down onto all four limbs and sprints out of the frame. It doesn't run like a dog or a bear. It moves like a sprinter exploding from the blocks, but on four legs, covering 30 feet of dense forest in less than a second. No human can move like that. No animal I know of moves like that. So tonight, I couldn't take it anymore. I came to the office, locked the door, and pulled out the big county map. I put a red pin in every spot. Where the Petersons were found, where the hiker's car was, Hemlock's farm, the trail cam location. I wanted to see a pattern, a hunting ground, anything. And I found one. The locations all followed the twisting path of Dogman Creek, which I expected. I drew lines, trying to triangulate a central point, a nest, a den. My hand started to shake as the lines began to converge. They weren't pointing to some dark, unknown cave deep in the national forest. Every single pin, every single incident, formed a near-perfect circle. And in the exact center of that circle was another pin. A blue one I'd put there years ago to mark my own property. My house, the house I grew up in, the house my father built. I felt the blood drain from my face. I remembered the flood. I remembered the giant 100-year-old oak that used to stand at the edge of my property, right by the creek. Its roots were so thick they practically held up the bank. The flood tore it out of the ground. I remember looking at the massive, dark hole it left behind, a pit filled with muddy water and tangled roots. It's been there all along. It wasn't washed in by the flood. It was let out. I'm home now. My old dog, Buster, who's never been afraid of anything, won't come out from under the bed. He just lies there, making a low, soft whining sound. Every few minutes, I hear something outside. A soft scraping sound along the foundation of the house, like claws dragging on stone. I keep telling myself it's just a branch in the wind. But the wind died down hours ago. That old legend, the one that gave the creek its name. I never paid it any mind. My grandpa used to tell it. He said something sleeps under the earth, and the only thing that keeps it down is the roots of the old trees. He said you should never ever cut them down. We didn't cut it down, the water did. And now, whatever was sleeping is awake. The map doesn't lie. It's not just hunting along the creek. It's hunting in a circle around its home. And I'm living right in the middle of it. I think it's just reestablishing its territory, and I think it knows I'm here.